There would be a laugh echoing in the sky. Peter's spider sense would go off, and it was the goblin hovering in the air. He thought, how can this be? Norman's back? He would yell, telling people to look out, and Peter would move MJ out of the way really fast, and the green goblin would still be laughing in the air, saying that there was a new goblin in town, and Peter knew that he was pretty much powerless. He couldn't do anything. He couldn't reveal his identity because the marriage was actually in public and it was outside, so there was nothing that could really be done, because if he ended up revealing himself, J. Jonah Jameson, Robbie, all of his friends would end up finding out. The Green Goblin would catch Peter and he would be choked in the air. Green Goblin would throw him to the ground and he would look at MJ, who was running with Aunt May. He would use a pumpkin bomb, blowing everything up on sight. The car Aunt May was trying to get into would be sent flying back. J. Jonah Jameson would try helping her, but the Green Goblin would take him, launching him back onto a table of food. Green Goblin would take MJ and he would look to see Peter on the ground. He would fly off with her and Peter would slowly get back up, looking at the flipped car, and he would scream to Aunt May and people would be running and screaming, and Peter would lift up the car without ease, getting her up because of how mad he was. He would walk carrying her, telling her it was going to be okay, and she would end up looking at Peter and she would smile, telling him that everything was going to be okay. And then she said, with great power also must come, and then she ended up dying in Peter's arms, and that's where Peter would actually cry, and within his soul he had so much anger, he ended up letting it happen again. First it was Uncle Ben, now it was Aunt May. He would make a fist and he would rip his tie off and he would start swinging to the Osborne house. In this timeline, Peter is more mad than ever because of Aunt May's death, and in his anger, it's much more worse than him even having the symbiote. Peter would show up with his ripped up suit and his Spider-Man suit underneath it, and he would see Harry, and Harry would be laughing, asking how the marriage was going, and Peter in a rage would kick him to the ground, and Harry would be making that Green Goblin laugh, and out of nowhere the Goblin's glider would crash into the room and Peter would dodge it. He would be yelling, saying where MJ was, and Peter would try throwing a punch, but Harry would kick him to the ground, and Harry would quickly run, putting his Green Goblin suit on, saying that he had nothing left now and that he was finally going to finish the job once and for all, and he would reveal that MJ was actually tied up to a chair within the Goblin serum chamber, and that there was only 5 minutes until the countdown would go off. Peter would scream, telling him to stop this madness, and that he didn't kill his father. His spider sense would go off, and there would be pumpkin bombs planted everywhere in the house, and that they could go off at any time, exploding the entire area. Peter would punch Harry into a wall, knocking him out, and he would web him up, and he would run towards MJ, breaking the glass. He would keep punching the glass until it was breaking. His hands were bleeding. He would throw her out the window, using webs to drop her for safety, and Peter would turn towards Harry, saying that Aunt May was dead because of him, and Harry would try coming back to reality, saying that the Goblin did it, and he would yell no, grabbing the same knife from Spider-Man 2, and he would try stabbing Peter, but Peter would actually kick him back into a wall, and Harry would grab a pumpkin bomb, saying that he was sorry, and he would throw it, and Peter would scream, and he would try using his webs to stop the explosion, and what would happen is the entire building would explode and everything would blow up, and Peter would be underneath debris. It was completely destroyed. He would crawl out of it, and MJ would be looking, screaming for Peter. She would find a bloody mask of the Green Goblin, and Peter would try crawling, getting to his feet. He was behind debris and rubble and everything. MJ would drag his broken down body out of the explosion, and she would be crying, knowing that if she brings him to the hospital, that they'll find out that he's Spider-Man, and all of his enemies would know. So she ends up trying to rip the suit off, and the ambulance would end up coming in time, and they would save Peter, and he'd actually be at the hospital for like 2 or 3 days recovering from the injuries, and that's where the timeline would actually end, because what would happen is there would be a funeral for Harry Osborn, and there would also be a funeral for Aunt May, and Peter would end up recovering, becoming Spider-Man once more, and he would actually make his way back to Kurt Connors' place to get more updates on the symbiote and what was going on with that, and in this timeline, Eddie Brock ends up living, so a lot of the timeline is now changed, and a lot of events ended up going earlier. So that's pretty much what if Spider-Man never bonded with the symbiote in Spider-Man 3. Let me know your thoughts about me actually removing Venom from this timeline, and how events really went differently, and Bernard, you know, didn't tell Harry about his father, because that couldn't be done. But anyways, guys, make sure to subscribe, like, share if you guys do like these fan fictions, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out.